Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the Kevin Davis Insurance Cyber Insurance Coverage for Community Associations webinar. My name is Sherry Branson, and I'm your host today. I'm now joined by Kevin Davis, the president of Kevin Davis Insurance, and Kevin joins us now from Los Angeles. Good afternoon, Kevin.
Hey, Sherry, how you doing?
Doing great. Kevin, it's springtime, and parts of the United States are thawing out after a long winter. I know it's been beautiful out in California, but other parts of the country are just getting into spring now. So it's an interesting time of year, an exciting time of year. It's very pretty. And there's a lot to talk about. Last month we talked quite a bit about cyber crime and what's going on in the cyber world. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about cyber insurance for community associations.
Yeah, that's right. Last month was really talking about the need for cyber. This month is going to talk about specifically insurance-related coverage. So if you're talking about a particular goal, is to demonstrate why cyber coverage is a must for communities.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't pick up the newspaper or turn on the television without seeing something going on with a hack. I mean, it happened to Target, it happened to Anthem, it's happened to a lot of other companies, both large and small.
Yeah, that's true. And the one thing they all have in common, because we do spend a lot of time looking at the large corporations that have these data breaches, but the one thing they all have in common is that every corporation out there, every business has data on clients, has data on employees, have data on their customers, their vendors, all these people out there, right? And when that information is stolen or lost, that means what you have is a data breach. Okay? Right now you have the regulation, a lot of regulation out there from the federal and the state level that really demands that these people notify individuals if there's a cyber loss. And regulators right now are so careful that they look at how you respond to a breach and make sure you have the proper risk management techniques in place prior to the breach and even after the breach.
So there's a lot to be aware of from the customer's point of view, people who are being breached, and also the agent's point of view, and from a legal standpoint regarding state and federal guidelines.
Yeah, because again, not only has the federal state really has stepped up their game in terms of what breach is about, but we know more now. You know, we understand about our right to privacy and information that should be protected. When it's not protected, we know and we can go after the company that really caused the breach.
Absolutely. And I can imagine, Kevin, that some of these breaches, cost a lot of money, and if a company is small, it may end up bankrupting a company.
Exactly. Yes.
And I did hear, I don't know if this is true or not, but there were an average of 15 breaches per week in 2014. So as insurance professionals, it's very important for us to be aware of the risk involved so we can inform our clients so that they can protect themselves from these breaches.
And the numbers are not diminishing. They're rising.
Now, Kevin, we talk about a data breach. I mean, we hear that term thrown around quite a bit. Can you explain to everybody joining us today what exactly is a data breach? And if anybody has any questions about what we go over today, please send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and I'm happy to answer your question or have somebody else answer your question and also send you a copy of our presentation. What exactly is a data breach, Kevin?
Okay. When you talk about a data breach, you're talking about the unlawful and unauthorized acquisition of personal information that compromise the security, confidentiality, integrity of a personal information. Now, what that means is that you have the unlawful taking of information, personal information. And personal information is an individual's first name plus social security numbers, driver's license, ID number, account number, credit card number, debit card number, all these special extra things that you have. When they combine together, that is a data breach loss. Now, understand, Sherry, is that having a paper with Social Security's number on it, and all of a sudden you see your personal Social Security number on that list, but no name attached, that is not a data breach. You may not like it, but as long as your name's not attached to it, it is not a data breach.
They would have no idea who it belongs to, so that makes a lot of sense. It is kind of scary that it would be out there.
But you know that's yours, and you can complain to your board of directors that my name is my number's on this list, and you can be upset by it.
Of course.
not a data breach.
It's not actually a data breach. Okay, that makes sense. And now, Kevin, with all this data being breached, how is it happening? How is it being stolen?
Okay, you look at the causes of loss, okay? You're looking at a couple of things. You're looking at hackers, which represents about 23%. Lost stolen laptops, 15%. Viruses, 18%. So this represents about 60% of all the data breaches out there.
60%. Okay, that's a big percentage. And laptops get lost all the time at airports and all over the place. And where is the rest coming from, Kevin? Where is the rest of information?
Sure, you're talking about rogue employees. So people who actually work there who gets this information and maybe go out and sell it. They have paper files, okay? People don't understand that paper files. If you have files there with information on about people's names, addresses, and driver's license numbers, social security numbers, and they leave it out, that is a data breach. And then the rest of them are pretty much staff mistakes.
Staff mistakes, okay. And I would assume, Kevin, that with these breaches, there are expenses involved for a company when a breach actually occurs. Can you talk a little bit about what are the expenses involved?
Okay. Now, this is the important part because when you have a data breach, okay, there are expenses that are involved in there. There are costs that the person who has the breach has to look into. And right now you see a list there of eight cost items. The first one is a forensic examination. This examination determines if there's a breach and the severity and scope of the breach. Because what you have to do to determine is that really an actual breach itself or just an incident.
Okay.
And a forensic exam can be performed by either somebody internally or outsourced to a third party.
Okay. And if you outsource it, I can imagine that would be more expensive.
Well, if you outsource, yeah, it's more expensive, but if it's done internally, people are going to question the results. They're going to question, did you do the good enough job? Do you have the right information? So we recommend you go to a third party and spend an extra couple dollars.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So the next one is the notification of third parties. Okay, so after you have your forensic examinations finished, then you notify the actual people. Now, most states out there have enacted a data breach notification laws out there that requires you to let people know once any of this personal identifiable information is lost or stolen. So you have to go out there and notify the individuals. Now, that means each company out there has to review each state-specific requirement. But many companies out there really don't understand that each law is different. Some laws require you to do certain things and some don't. So you have to probably get an outsider to come in and really tell you the things you need to know in terms of notification.
Absolutely.
The third area is call centers, okay? So now you have your forensics is done. You notify the third party. You want to set up a call center, okay? Now, you don't have to do it by law, but it's good to put a phone number on these notification letters because people out there really want to know more about what's going on and the extent of the breach.
Absolutely. I know I was one of the, Anthem was hacked and I was affected by that, and I received a letter with a phone number, a call center on it, and it made me feel much better to have a number to call.
Exactly. So then the fourth one is credit and identity monitoring. Credit monitoring. So this is not required by law, but it makes good sense to let people know that there'll be some credit monitoring of what happened. So they'll make sure that you really have any issues out there outstanding. So credit monitoring is number 4. Number 5 is public relations. A company needs to engage a PR firm specialized in damage control to help reduce the harm caused by the reputation from this data breach. So you got public relations costs involved.
I can imagine that would be, yeah, that's really important, especially when, you know, they could lose a lot of customers and it could actually close the company down if enough people lose confidence in that company.
And that's the point about the PR part because, you know, it's really the long-term consequences in there. You know, people will lose confidence and will move to other corporations or other entities that really can provide another service. So I would say right now it's really important to have that PR service available.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the next one, or next 3 you're talking about here, the first 5 are your direct expenses, expenses that you're going to have to pay out of your own pocket. The next one are going to be more expensive, liability-driven situations. Like the first one, we talk about legal defense. You're talking about, a lawsuit, your potential liabilities as a result of a data breach. And what they include is the cost to indemnify victims of identity theft, cost to indemnify the financial institutions for their costs related to reissuing credit cards, and your own defense costs. So you have to defend yourself also.
Okay. And Kevin, speaking of these, the legal defense, I heard about a college in Arizona that was hacked by hackers, and then they got sued.
Yeah. It was called the Maricopa County Community College. It's a small college in Arizona, and they were a victim of a breach in 2011. Now, the problem is they didn't really deal with it the way they should have dealt with it, and guess what? It led to another breach in 2013. Now, over 2.5 million records were stolen. In addition to dealing with the data breach, there was a class action suit. There actually was a lawsuit, okay, against the university for not correcting the problem which caused the 2011 breach.
Wow, so they got breached twice.
Yes, yes. And so you're talking about the lawyer fees, consulting, repair, credit monitoring. The university itself spent about $20 million as a result of the data breach.
$20 million. That's incredible. And this is a small community college. So this is a large, large claim. That's incredible.
So now when you talk about the legal defense, the next area, which is regulatory proceeding, fines, and penalties, again, depending on the nature of the data breach, a company may have to defend itself not only against individuals who lost money or lost their data, but also the federal and state authorities, such as the Federal Trade Commission or state attorney generals. So what they do is come in and will look at, see what happened, and charge a fine or penalty.
Okay, and I can imagine those fines can be rather large.
Yes, yes, the fines and penalties can be rather large, and the question is, they may or may not be insurable depending on the carrier providing the coverage. Oh,
okay, so that's a really important thing to pay attention to. Do you have coverage for these fines and penalties in your policy?
Exactly. I'll give you an example of one that I read about, is that you had a consumer information company that specialized in the information, and they lost 100,000 Social Security numbers. Now, what happened was the Federal Trade Commission came in, did an investigation, and alleged the company for unfair and deceptive trade practices. So they found out that the FTC found that the company there didn't have basic security measures in place at the time of the breach, despite they advertised how security conscious they were, and their security management practices were outstanding.
Oh boy, okay, yeah, that is pretty deceptive.
So the company was fined $500,000 and required to implement what was called a comprehensive written information security program that was subject to an audit for the next 10 years. Oh,
a $500,000 fine. Yeah, people are handing over their information, and if a company is saying they're secure, it's protected information, and it's not securely protected, that just ends up blowing up in the end. It ends up
exactly.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and that leads to the next one. Next expense is the actual expense to put together a comprehensive written information security program. You see, if a regulatory agent is involved, then after the breach, it may require the breach company to implement this comprehensive written security program, and then it is auditable over the next couple of years to make sure that they are keeping it up to date and keeping track of it. So those are your 8 costs that you're going to have associated with a data breach.
And those can add up very quickly. It just sounds like, that's a lot of costs, and it could really spiral out of control. And now, Kevin, today we're talking about cyber insurance coverage and community associations. And why would a community association need cyber coverage, though?
Okay. Now, for community association, data breach can come from a number of places, such as a theft of association funds, accidentally publishing information on their own in-house website, having their system hacked by either a disgruntled employee, board member, community manager, unit owner. Also, you have these outside data theft rings. Okay, you have files that they have that just dumped improperly, and of course, they don't have, they don't shred the data they do have. paper data. So those are kind of things you are concerned about. I mean, we had a situation that we heard about where a manager left his laptop in his car. The laptop was stolen. Now, the problem is that the laptop was not password protected. So the results could have been devastating. There was no personal information that was on the laptop that caused a data breach, but it was an incident filed. And again, those kind of things can be really, really expensive to take care of, especially if it's a management company, because again, what they do is manage more than one property. So they may notify, yes, many, many different properties.
They just got lucky in that situation.
It could be, yeah. So, but on top of that, the management companies also, they take these monthly assessments through their web-based portal, okay? And they store the information, the name, addresses, banking information. They do it for speed and convenience. But the question is that is security and privacy in question? Are they questioning that? Can they receive the benefits while protecting the association's information?
And Kevin, I mean, in addition to the unit owners, these property managers that are handling information for associations and the association treasurer, the board members, it's more than just the unit owners that are affected, correct?
Yeah, you have employees, you have the vendors, you have the professionals, all who give their personal information out to the board of directors or the manager. And again, it's not just the data breach that you're worrying about the first party, but the association can face negligence lawsuits for failing to place greater safeguards on that data. Again, which could be hugely expensive for the board of directors who live in that community.
Absolutely. And, I'm thinking about, I live in an association, Kevin, and, we have a board of directors, of course. They're all volunteers, but it's a small association. It's not that large. So I'm thinking that, they're pretty vulnerable because we don't have an IT professional on staff or an IT department, for that matter.
And that's the problem. These smaller organizations, they don't understand that you have to have some type of anti-spam software or anti-spyware protection. But a lot of them don't because they're so small they don't realize it. And you probably have a large percentage of companies out there that don't even bother with a computer firewall. So again, the smaller the most cyber attackers follow the path of least resistance. That means targeting the various business that can least afford to be hit. They know exactly how to go after it and where to look and how to get this information.
How to find the most vulnerable.
Exactly, yes.
And now, Kevin, as far as protection goes, what are some protection strategies that associations can use?
Sure. I mean, this is a real simple one, is that the people who live in these community associations, the board of directors, have to understand that they don't have to collect all that information. It's okay to collect the names and addresses and telephone numbers, but do you need Social Security numbers? Do you need driver's license numbers? Do you need all that information? And if you don't collect it. So that's probably the big thing. And then also on the websites, watch out what kind of personal information you put on the website and make sure that it is protected, the website. Every person who's involved in that website should know what's appropriate and not appropriate to include on the website.
Basically, the more information that an association gathers or a company gathers, the more at risk they are if there is a breach. So they should think twice about what they need and what they don't need.
Exactly. What should be put in there and what they should not put on the website. Yes.
And what they should collect. And Kevin, my association, there's been a lot of turnover on our board of directors, and the board of directors are all volunteers, and I'm sure a lot of associations out there have a high turnover. So I would think that would be a risk too.
Yeah, because of the high turnover, the association needs to have a policy in place that requires the outgoing members to turn in or erase any sensitive information. And not only do that, but when a new board comes in, you give them new passwords, give them training to understand the importance of keeping track of the data so that you don't have a data breach in the future.
Absolutely. And I would think, as I mentioned before, we don't have an IT professional at our association, and I'm sure a lot of associations don't have IT departments. Wouldn't it make sense to hire a computer specialist or a consultant to come in and make sure that the data is safe?
Well, most associations can't afford it right now, But as you can see, technology is getting more complex and more complex. The laws require more and more, or become more and more sophisticated. So there are people out there who need to have the knowledge and the resources available to protect the association against these data breaches. So you may not have it today, but I suspect sometime in the future it may happen.
I think it would be money well spent to prevent the costs, the expenses involved in a breach if you did have a breach. I think
that's it. Yes.
A good investment. And now, Kevin, when we take a look at the cost of an actual breach per record, like per record stolen, we're going to be looking at a chart in a couple minutes. What are the actual costs involved, per record stolen?
Okay. When you talk about the costs involved, the average loss for a breach of 1,000 records is between $52,000 and $87,000, according to Verizon 2015 Data Breach Investigation Reports. For community associations with 100 units, the actual number of records can vary significantly. For example, a 100-unit community association could have 2 records per household and could have as many as 4. That's about 300 to 400 records per association. And then you got to remember there are renters out there, and there are people who move that you have to find because that information is there also. Then you have vendors, you have landscapers, you have pool, you have roofers, you have management company. They have all these people in there. So now you're looking at a breach as many as 500 people, or 500 records, 500 individual records. At 500 records, the loss is somewhere between $35,000 and $60,000 per association.
Okay, those are big numbers. Those are really big numbers. So that's another thing to take in consideration. How large is the association, and how big could this expense go with the records being breached?
Because you're looking at 200 units there, that's going to be double that. So you're talking about around $100,000 for a data breach.
Yeah, this is a lot of money that we're talking about. Big, big numbers. And now, Kevin, we have a lot of brokers with us today on the webinar, and when they're trying to advise their clients and trying to shop around for cyber insurance, what should they be looking for when they're shopping?
Okay. All right. First, you have to understand that there's no standard cyber policy. Now, when you purchase a cyber policy, be sure that you're provided with a written explanation of what the terms, conditions, and definition means, and what it covers excluded, and how their claims process will function. How to report a claim is really important, especially when it comes to the insurer's obligation as opposed to the state obligation. State laws may have a different requirement than what the policy states. So, because there's a difference between reporting an incident versus reporting an actual data breach. So, you have to understand what the policy says.
And now, Kevin, how many different types of cyber insurance coverage are there?
Okay, there are many types, but here are there are 4 main coverages you need to be concerned with, and 3 very important crime insurance coverages that you have to be concerned with. Okay, the first 2 on the cyber policy are liability coverages. The first one is called Network and Information Security Liability, and the second one is Regulatory Defense Expense. Part 2 of the cyber policy is first-party expenses and includes security breach notification expense and crisis management expense. And then you have the crime policy, which is a standalone policy that has employee dishonesty, and you're adding computer crime, funds transfer, and social engineering coverage.
And social engineering, I know, is new. That's a new coverage, everybody. I just wanted to mention that. If you have any questions, again, about what we go over today, please send an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and I'll answer your question, send you a copy of today's presentation, and I also have a marketing flyer on social engineering. So if you'd like a copy of that, please let me know.
Okay. Sherry, now when you talk about cyber insurance coverage, and the first one we talked about was Network and Information Security Liability. What that is, you have to look at the key words in that whole big paragraph is the insured who suffers a loss for a network and information security wrongful act. So it is a wrongful act policy, just like the D&O we sell, a wrongful act policy. Definition of wrongful act here is the failure to prevent unauthorized access to or use of data containing identity information. So you didn't prevent the loss, you didn't prevent the access, use, and it contains identity information. And again, identity information is social security number, driver's license number, credit card numbers, so that is what a network and information security wrongful act is. So now the next question is, are you insured? Is it a loss under the policy? Is it a claim? So a loss means defense expense in which the insured is legally obligated to pay as a result of a claim. And a claim is a written demand for monetary or non-monetary relief. So a claim is the same as our D&O. So you have to understand that is a claim under the policy. And so now you have, are you insured or not? Insured means a natural person who is or was or shall become a board of trustees, manager, just like our D&O. And the one thing that's different about this policy for us is that we also include the property management company on the cyber policy.
And that's very important that the property manager is included because they handle much of the affairs for the associations, many of them.
Exactly. So we figured it was really important so that you'd avoid any fighting or battle. And if you have a property manager whose job is to ask the association to indemnify them for any loss, you make sure they both are on the policy together.
Absolutely.
So that's the first one. The second one is regulatory defense expense. So you have two liability. This is the regulatory expense. This is what we talked about earlier with a $500,000 fine, so that if a state attorney general or the Federal Trade Commission, any federal, state, or local entity comes in and makes a claim against you, it's defense expense under this insuring agreement. So now we move to part two, which are the first-party claims. The first one we're talking about is the crisis management event expense. Okay, crisis management event expense. And basically that is that the policy will pay reasonable costs, fees, and expenses incurred in maintaining or going after a public relations firm. So you need a public relations firm. That is crisis management event expense. Very simple.
Straightforward.
Okay. The next one is security breach, remediation, and notification expense, which is all the reasonable fees, costs, and expenses for which can be attributable directly to a data breach. So the data breach, all the expenses we talked about earlier, that's covered under the second part of the cyber policy. So two parts to it, the liability and then the first party.
Okay.
Now, so let's talk about the exclusions under the cyber policy. And that is the important one. Everybody wants to know what's excluded, what's not covered under the cyber policy. When we talk about the exclusions, the number one we're talking about there is war, invasion, acts of foreign enemies. Okay, this is your standard war exclusion found in most policies. However, there's a carve-out for acts of terrorism as defined in the TRIA, Terrorism Risk Insurance Act. So we do pick up coverage for the terrorism, but state-sponsored attacks may be considered acts of war and may be excluded from coverage.
Okay, so that would be something like with the Sony hack last year, Kevin, with Korea. They were saying that Korea may have hacked Sony, so that would have been considered an act of war.
Exactly. If Congress says that it's a state-sponsored cyber attack and is an act of war, it probably be excluded under the cyber policy.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right. So then we have the bodily injury and property damage exclusion and pollution. Those are absolute exclusions that there's no coverage at all if they allege any of these allegations. Then we have any known fact, circumstance, or event that may give rise to a claim. So it's your prior knowledge section, so that if there's a claim that the insured has knowledge of, it could be denied for a specific event, just like it is under the D&O. Again, you have a dishonesty, fraud, willful violation of law, gaining profit or advantage. Now, this deals with intentional acts by an employee. Now, that's in here because if there's an intentional act by an employee, it's usually covered under the crime policy. However, if you take personal identifiable information, that's not a tangible loss. It's not, you didn't steal thousands of dollars of whatever. It is intangible. So it's covered under this policy here for defense costs until final adjudication established that the individual did commit an intentional act. Once that, then coverage ceases. So there's a carve back in there for some coverage there. And then we have the continuity, retroactive date, pending prior litigation date, all those dates. If it's a brand new account, then all those dates will be the inception date of the policy. which means there's no prior acts under the cyber policy.
No prior acts. Okay. Thank you. And now, Kevin, you know, for community associations, you're talking about crime insurance, how important it is. I mean, when I think about my association and other associations, there's very little oversight for the records, for the data. A lot of it's handed over to the property manager, as we discussed earlier. And there's no requirements for anybody to become a board member or a treasurer. So this, when you think about the situation, there's a lot of opportunity for information to be breached.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to have the computer theft part, because, or the crime insurance part, because when you talk about crime losses, you're talking about employee dishonesty, which covers the employee for anything. But there's so many things going on because the board of directors and the management company are so busy these days, they can't keep track of all these different things. So along with the cyber policy, you have to make sure you have employee dishonesty, plus your computer crime, funds transfer, and your social engineering. Now, your computer crime, its coverage applies when a non-employee enters the premises, obtains a password, and uses the password to embezzle funds. So that's like when you leave your password on your computer, and all of a sudden somebody enters the premises and gets access to your computer there and remove funds. Funds transfer is really similar to computer crime, but because the non-employees involved. But they obtain your password usually through a virus or worm or something, and downloads it and get access that way without coming onto the premises.
Okay, that's through an email, Kevin.
Yes.
Funds transfer. Okay.
Now, the new one and the big one is social engineering. Social engineering covers and insures for social engineering fraud.
Okay, can you explain that one a little bit, Kevin? I just want to mention again, everybody, that we have a flyer on that. If you'd like a flyer about the social engineering coverage, please send me an email, and I'm happy to send it to you.
Sure. Okay, social engineering fraud is the manipulation of people into divulging confidential information for the purpose of committing fraud or gaining access to the system for fraudulent means. Now, for example, a board member sent an email asking the manager to forward a payment to a different bank. The payment was made. The manager realized later that the email was not from the board member. The email sender used the funds to purchase airline tickets. The manager realized the fraud, tried to cancel the tickets, but the airline said no.
Okay.
Okay? Now, for this coverage to work, an employee must be convinced that a request to send money to alternative location is legitimate, and therefore acts on that because they believe it's legitimate. The money is sent to the new account, and the legitimate recipient never receives the money. That is social engineering fraud.
Social engineering fraud. Okay. Yes, I remember last year, a couple of years ago, I received emails from a fraudulent Bank of America, you know, and they asked me to transfer money. So that's
right now. That's different. That's called phishing.
Oh, okay. Spear phishing.
No, that's regular phishing.
Oh, regular phishing.
Totally different. Yes.
Okay, we've got phishing and we have spear phishing.
Yeah.
I know we have a lot of cybercrime going on. Kevin, now spear phishing, let's talk about that a little bit. What's going on in that area?
When you talk about phishing, that is social engineering. And either spear phishing or phishing. Phishing is when you send those emails out that says, here you go, your Bank of America has expired, please update, fill this out and update it. So that's phishing, and they try to get hold of everybody. Now, what spear phishing does is when an individual, the bad guy, specifically looks for information and targets an individual. For example, what they do is use social media. For example, you have the president of Happy Acres Homeowner Association. He's in Hawaii on vacation. Okay, he lets everybody know he's on Hawaii by Facebook.
Put those pictures on Facebook of sitting on the beach.
Exactly. So the bad guy finds out about this, uses the information to mislead the manager into sending funds to a fictitious account.
Okay. So with everybody using social media these days and putting pictures and notices out there, it really kind of makes you stop and think about doing that before you put it out there for the world to see, because people are paying attention. Criminals are paying attention.
And what happens? They'll send you an email saying, "Guess what? We hear you in Hawaii. Update your information because your credit card's about to expire." And again, people fill out this information, and it's a whole new area out there. And again, we're recommending this whole new endorsement to really protect your funds of your association.
Absolutely. Social engineering. Again, we have a flyer on this which explains it in more detail. And I also have a separate flyer on the crime policy by itself, which breaks down the various coverages besides social engineering. So I can send you both if you'd like both.
Mm-hmm.
So I bet this is happening more and more, Kevin, with everybody on social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now I've
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've also heard about phone numbers, fraudulent emails where they're copying signatures and phone numbers now, fraudulent phone numbers. I didn't know.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. All that, again, all that social engineering and is definitely something to be careful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Great. And now, Kevin, in summary, let's see. This was a great presentation. We talked a lot about all the cyber crimes that are taking place, and there was a lot of information in there, I know. So if you want a copy of today's presentation, please send me an email. And Kevin, what would you like to say in summary to sum everything up?
Sure. We see now why it's important to purchase a cyber coverage. It's very important. There's a significant exposure if you don't have the coverage, and because cyber losses are growing more and more. Data breaches are not going away anytime soon. So you got to be aware of the impact of cyber on your organization and make sure you're purchasing adequate insurance. Condo associations and management companies have done their part to safeguard this valuable, but again, you want to avoid these kind of costly lawsuits. So I would say, in conclusion, to make sure that you get a better understanding. If you have any questions, we're going to do next month is a question and answer on cyber. So we can answer some of the questions that we've been receiving over the past couple of months and put them in one big webinar.
Yes, that's great. That's right. On May 28th, you're all invited to join us for Cyber Insurance Q&A. And I received a lot of questions after last month's webinar. So if you have any new questions or you want us to go over anything that we've done last month or this month, please send your questions in early and we can get to them in next month's webinar. And that's on May 28th. So if you'd like a copy, if you'd like the copy of the PowerPoint, if you'd like to listen to this webinar again on a YouTube link, I can also email you the YouTube link. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And have a great afternoon. Take care.